Before the German invasion of the Soviet Union during the Second World War, the Germans were not aware of two newly developed tanks, the T-34 and the KV. Because of this, they were extremely surprised when they first met in combat in June 1941. The German anti-tank weapons were not very effective against these new vehicles, and this prompted the Germans to develop different technology and also different tanks. The T-34 is one of the world's most famous tanks, and the production of these vehicles is seen as a major turning point in the Second World War. However, are these tanks any good? Remember, to support the channel, please subscribe. The answer to the question, was the T-34 any good, is quite straightforward. Yes, it was rather good. Initially, when the Germans encountered it, they thought it was significantly better than anything they had, and they were forced to create something better, thus giving birth to the Panther tank. World War see innovation and an arms race, so the T-34 inspired the Germans to make their superior military vehicles. One of the biggest benefits of the T-34 was its sloped armour. This is something that was quite rare during the early stages of World War II. This meant that hits from enemy shells could glance off the armour and bounce off the tank, rather than putting a hole in it. This armour gave the tank extra protection without slowing it down. The gun on the T-34 initially was a 75mm gun, and during 1941 this was classed as being rather good. The German tanks were only fitted with 50mm guns, however the Germans were rather decent at developing their guns quickly. Because of this, the Soviets introduced a much more superior 85mm gun, placing on their T-34s in 1944. This tank would then be pivotal in battles such as Seelow Heights and with the advancement of Soviet troops into Berlin. The T-34 was also very manoeuvrable, and it had a very wide track compared to German tanks. This allowed it to drive over mud, snow and anything really that was in its way. There was no need to worry about the vehicle being bogged down in the mud either. The early T-34s also had a good power to weight ratio, giving it a better ability to accelerate, turn and move over rough terrain. Possibly one of the biggest strengths of the T-34, however, is the simple design. When looking at one, it's what you imagine a tank should look like. The simplicity of it made it easier to produce on a mass scale. Also, this allowed parts to be mass produced too. Even though some original T-34 factories were captured by the Germans, around 65,000 T-34s were produced. Compare this to the number of Panther or even Tiger tanks produced, you can see why the T-34 helped towards the defeat of Germany. Even when the Battle of Stalingrad was being fought with brutal street-to-street fighting, the factories would still be rolling tanks off their production lines. In fact, crews would just abandon their tanks if it broke down, rather than bothering to repair it. The old tank could be recovered later and fixed, and then sent back out to the front line with a new crew. The T-34, however, wasn't without its flaws. It had a two-man crew inside the turret, instead of the standard three-man inside the German tanks. The German tanks allowed the commander a free rein to watch over the surroundings, but inside an early T-34, the commander also had to help fire the gun. Also, the early T-34s didn't have radios, and these were fitted to special command tanks, so communication wasn't great. Tank crews would find it difficult to coordinate their actions with other tanks. Also, these crews were sometimes inexperienced and badly trained, especially during the early stages of production, and this led to a higher number of Soviet tanks being knocked out. Also, as with every other tank, it did have some weak spots. These on the T-34 were the tracks, the gun, the hatches, and also the viewports. All of the Second World War tanks also had weaker armour around the back and sides, so ambushing a tank could destroy even the most superior tanks of the day. So overall, the T-34 was a good tank. The sheer speed of mass production, coupled with the surprise factor that greeted the German troops in 1941, made it a formidable opponent. Its legacy today, however, remains one that helped lead towards the defeat of Nazi Germany. We hope you've enjoyed this video. To support the channel, please make sure to subscribe. Once again, thank you for watching.